Welcome back, friends, to the Grieving Nurse podcast. Today, we are going to talk about after your loved one has passed away, when to go back to work or how to handle going back to work. So, welcome everybody. Please like, subscribe, follow this podcast so I can get the word out to share with other people to help them through the hard times after a loved one has passed away. So, today we're going to talk about how to know you're ready to go back to work. So, a lot of people don't really have a choice, right? Like we financially we need to go back to work. We can't afford to take more time off. We really get very little bereavement leave, and a lot of times it's only for the people that qualify, like for the direct relative line, right? Like if your parents, siblings, I think grandparents are covered. I believe aunt and uncles are not covered. But it's hard, right? Because sometimes if an aunt or uncle passes away, they maybe were like your parent, or like, and so, or a friend, right? A really good friend passes away, like you don't get paid time off for that. You can take time off, right? If you have it built up, that's great. Use that. I want to talk about more so when we go back to work, why we go back to work, and how to handle that, how to help yourselves, and then the when to ask for help part. Okay. So, why we go back to work. So, like I kind of mentioned, most of us are going back to work because we need the money, right? Like, we can't afford to take the time off. I was fortunate that when my dad died, I was on maternity leave. And so I had a little extra time there. And then I was also very fortunate after my mom died. My nurse manager did not pressure me to come back to work, and I just basically told her, like, look, I'm out through December. Like, my mom passed away. We knew about it December 9th, and I just was like, I can't. And I was also part-time, and so they were able to manage without me. A lot of people do not even have that flexibility to take off 3 weeks of work. I financially really was not in a place to do it. I did it because I knew for my mental health, for my children, with the Christmas holiday and all the things kind of wrapped in there when my mom died, like I knew after the first of the year, um, that was when I was like, okay, I think I can like start thinking about work then. And so that was just what I decided for myself. I encourage people to really look at for themselves, um, why are you going back to work? If you need the money, go back to work. And then I'm going to give you the steps on how to handle that if you absolutely have to go back to work. If you don't need the money, are you just looking for a distraction? And that's okay too. But maybe you can work out with your employer to do a part-time or maybe a remote work for a while. Like, kind of think outside the box and brainstorm and then talk with your direct boss or your manager or your HR department to say, hey, like, this is what's happening right now. Like, can you work with me at all? And sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, sometimes they are willing to, sometimes they are unwilling to. But that's the big piece that can feel very heavy for people, right? So that's kind of the how portion of it, of the how to help yourself. Even if your employer is like, no, absolutely not. Like, you're being ridiculous. Just get over it already. It's been 5 days. Like, most of the time, again, most of the time, people do not understand the emotional roller coaster that you are going on right now. Most people do not. The people that do understand and say things like that have probably pushed those emotions aside and they just dealt with it in a unhealthy way. They just powered through whatever they had to do and they feel like everybody else should do the same. So wherever you're at, decide that for you, take time, but also understand that, it's still work. Like, we're not going to be super motivated to be like, yay, work. Like, we never are to begin with. And maybe you do. Maybe you love your job and it is a distraction for you, but then don't let it become the only thing, right? Because then sometimes we throw ourselves into our work that can kind of go backwards and we're not processing those emotions. And then when we do take a breath or we have a day off, like all the crushing emotions come at us. And even at nighttime, right? Like when we lay down to sleep and it's like, oh my gosh, my brain cannot shut off because I have been going all day long. I have not processed anything. And so when I try to lay down to sleep, I can't sleep. My mind just keeps going to the what ifs and the if I would have done this, if I would have said this, I should have appreciated this person. And so, if that's you, I am running a free webinar in February. I invite you to come to the webinar. It's about not being able to sleep after a loved one dies. And you go to nursegriefcoaching.com to sign up for that. But we're going to talk about some practical tips to how to help yourself when you are going back to work and when it feels very overwhelming, when you are like, I can't even go an hour without crying. I barely want to get out of bed, but I do need the money. I can't afford the time off, okay? And so first and foremost, I would question that if you really can't or if you're choosing not to, okay? And if you're like, "No, I can't. I need to go to work." Okay. So, how you can help yourself is first and foremost, like we'll start at the beginning of the day. Okay. We'll start at the beginning of the day and kind of work our way towards the end of the day. And I'm going to throw in little things you can do all throughout the day. And then, so if you're like listening to this and it's evening, start at the end of the day, right? Like throw in those tips right now. So when you wake up in the morning, our mind tends to, especially in the beginning, after our loved ones died, our mind tends to like all of a sudden remember, like, oh yeah, like you feel bad, but it takes a second for your brain to kind of catch up to why you feel bad. And then it's like hits you all over again of like, oh yeah, that's right. It wasn't a dream. My mom is still dead. My best friend is still dead. My spouse is still dead. And so that shock of it can like hit you. And so when it does hit you, I want you to then every time throughout the day that kind of catches up with you, those emotions, I want you to name the feeling, emotion that you're having, and then I want you to just sit with it for like a minute. So I want you to like when you first wake up in the morning, if it just kind of catches up with you and it's just like, ugh, like dread, a heaviness, uh I'm trying to think of the word for like I wouldn't say it's I mean it can be overwhelm, but more of a shock, right? Like a shock to the body. I want you to name whatever it is you're feeling. And if none of those words that I said really resonated with you, sat with you, go to Google and just type in a feelings wheel, emotions wheel, and it'll pull up hundreds of feelings and emotions. And I want you to pick one. And I want you to, when you get up in the morning, be like, oh yeah, there's that dread. There it is. And I want us to be okay with that uncomfortableness, right? Because it is uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable and painful for a while. But what happens is we try not to feel that. We try not to feel the dread. We try not to feel the overwhelm. And so we just hop up and be like, nope, not gonna think about it. I'm gonna go get ready for work and I'm gonna get out the door. Okay. But like when we don't think about it, when we don't allow it, it just keeps being stuffed inside our body and then it will come out other ways. So name the feeling, allow it for a moment, maybe in the shower. I found like for me, that was a nice time where I I wouldn't say nice always. A lot of times some memories would flood back and because it's quiet in the shower, right? Like and I want to encourage you to allow that quietness, not distract yourself with music or different things. Like allow that quiet so you can allow the feelings, process through them, and just allow them. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. Maybe warn others around you that you're going to be screaming in the shower so they're not like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Did they fall? But just allow that, okay? And then as you go throughout the day, look for little ways that you can then be like, oh, like there's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling very anxious right now. I'm feeling very sad right now. Like, look for little ways that you can start naming your emotions throughout the day. And then I really encourage people also to line up whatever you can line up, like right away in the morning, or, if you're a morning person, or even in the afternoon, like regroup again, or in the evening. If you're like, I'm not really a morning person, I do better in the evening. I can sit down and look at all the things I need to do for the next day. Really look at what what you think needs to be done the next day. And then I want you to ask yourself, does this really need to get done? Okay, because so often we put all these things on our list, our to-do list, and we're like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. And the reality is you maybe have to do half of those things, right? Like you maybe have to do half, maybe even like a fourth of the things have to get done. I'm saying, like, do the things that need to get done so you're not going to get fired, so your coworkers don't hate you. Like, now is the time to do bare minimum in order to get by. And so again, we don't want it to be like so bad that they're like, oh my gosh, I think I'm gonna have to fire them. But we want it to really be like the reality of, does this really have to get done? Or is it something that I'm just telling myself has to get done? And so look at that, question it, and then throughout the day, find little things that you can do for yourself. And when I am planning out my day, I like to also put in, at lunchtime, I'm gonna have, I like these energy teas. So I'm gonna have one of those with my lunch because I love them. I am going to, at night, lately I've been drinking a mint hot chocolate every night in the evening because it is so cold here. It is like -25 out. So I have a mint hot chocolate before I go to bed. And it's just something to then help yourself look forward to. So then you're not just like pressure to go to work. You don't want to be there. You don't want to really be doing anything, but you show up and like it just feels awful all the time. So allow the emotions, name the emotions, process the emotions if you can throughout the day, and then find little ways that you can add in things that you love and enjoy throughout the day. Ice cold water, making sure that you take bathroom breaks throughout the day. So often we just keep going, 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 and then we look back and we're like, oh, I don't even have time for a bathroom break. And it's like, we do, we're just not taking it. And I notice this very um in stark contrast when I look at my husband when he comes home at the end of the day versus myself coming home at the end of the day. And I come home and I'm like, I have to get the kids supper ready. And like, oh my gosh, like the counter's a mess. So I gotta clear that off first. Then I gotta get supper started because everybody's hungry. And I have to make sure that the kids are started on homework, like all the things. My husband comes in the door and he walks to the bedroom. He changes his clothes into something comfortable. And then he starts helping. It takes like 30 seconds. And for the longest time, this would annoy me to no end. But now I realize, like, oh, he's just putting his oxygen mask on first. He's just making sure, hey, like, in order to be my best self and care for my family, I don't want to have blue jeans on anymore. I want to put on gym shorts. And so he'll put on gym shorts. And that's what I'm saying. Look for little ways for yourself that you can do that. I am still not very good at this. I still so often come in, I have to pee, but instead, and I'm in uncomfortable clothes or clothes that I want to change out for the day, but instead, I'm in the kitchen for 45 minutes, making supper, getting the kids on homework, in my uncomfortable clothes, having to pee, and then when we all are like, okay, it's supper time, sit down, then I go to the bathroom while everybody's eating and eating their hot food and mine's getting cold because I put off my basic needs and just like being and taking care of myself, right? So I want to give you guys permission to like look for little ways that you can take care of yourself throughout the day. Okay. And then the final part is to ask for help. And I know this is hard, right? I am 5 years out from my parents dying, and I find it so hard to say when I need help, when I'm having a hard day. Like something about it is so vulnerable to me that I do not want to communicate that. I don't want to say that. I don't even want to act that way because that makes me look weak. I think it makes me look weak, right? But my husband wants to help. My kids really do want to help. They might gripe about it, right? But they they do. They see when I'm struggling, they're like, Mom, like, what do you need help with? Like, and so if we keep holding that in, it gets to the point where we're so overwhelmed, we are so exhausted that when somebody asks, well, what do you need help with? We're like, I don't know. I don't know. I just need help. And so I invite you also to look for ways that maybe a coworker can take a project from you, or maybe you have people that work underneath you that can help you with the little things. Maybe you just need to have a conversation with your boss or your manager and be like, I am so sorry, but my mind is so foggy right now, and I don't want to mess up on things. So I'm going to get this portion done, but could you double check my work? Or I'm going to get this portion done, but could somebody please help me with this part, right? And really, that will give us the strength then to focus on ourselves for this time. So then we can do our work later on, right? Like this grief fog, even though it feels like it will last forever, will not last forever. It really won't. I know it feels like it will, but it won't. And so then as it gets better, then you can start saying, oh, like I'm okay. And the more we ask for help, the more that we recognize our feelings and process them instead of pushing them away, the faster we get through that fog. Okay. So, and I know it feels like counterproductive. I know that like you think if I sit down and feel my emotions, like I'll never stop. And that's not true. When you allow the emotions, when you allow the feelings, it goes away in 60 to 90 seconds. Now, that's not saying it won't come back in 30 seconds, that it won't come back in 10 minutes, but then you know, okay, that means I need to sit down. I need to process this again. It's okay. I am worth the time. Okay? Like, I am worth the time. I am worth nurturing for a little bit. This is a blip in the grand scheme of things. I'm important too. All right, so I hope that helps everybody. I hope you have some tips now to help you get through your workday. And I am praying for you guys. I hope you have the very best possible day that you can. And again, please go to nursegriefcoaching.com, sign up for that webinar. I'm going to talk through all things sleep in February. So, nursecoaching.com, and I will see you next week.